I'm Leo, I'm 28, and while I was halfway across the world securing a promotion that I bled for, my parents sold my dream car, the one thing that represented 10 years of my own sweat and sacrifice, to fund my brother's European vacation. Before I tell you about the look on their faces when they realized they'd committed multiple felonies, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. The jet lag was a physical weight, a dull throb behind my eyes after the 14-hour flight from Tokyo. But underneath the exhaustion, a wire of anxiety was pulled taut in my gut. It had been humming for the last week of my trip, a low-frequency warning that something was wrong back home. My parents had been evasive, short answers, vague replies, not their usual style, especially not my mother's. I pulled my rental into the familiar driveway of their suburban home in Glenview, the house I grew up in. The basketball hoop above the garage was rusted at the rim, just like it was when I left. The oak tree my grandfather and I planted was a giant now, its leaves just beginning to turn the color of fire. It all looked the same, but the feeling was different. Felt cold. I didn't even go inside the house first. I walked straight to the garage, the keypad code a muscle memory. The door rumbled upwards, painfully slow, revealing the space inside. And my heart dropped into my stomach. It was empty. The concrete floor, stained with oil spots from decades of my grandpa's and my own projects, was bare. The space where my 1969 Corvette Stingray, my rally red dream, my masterpiece, should have been sitting under its custom cover was just gone. There was nothing there but a dark, rectangular stain on the floor, like the ghost of where it used to be. The door from the kitchen creaked open. My mother, Diane, stood there, wiping her hands on an apron. She had a tight, self-satisfied smile on her face that I knew all too well. It was the smile she wore whenever she felt she'd won some unspoken family competition. "Leo, you're back," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "How was Japan?" I couldn't speak. I just pointed a trembling finger at the empty space. Where is my car?" Her smile widened into a sneer. "Oh, that old thing," she said, waving a dismissive hand. She stepped into the garage, her eyes gleaming. "Well, you should be proud. Thanks to your car, our golden boy is having the time of his life." I stared at her, the words not making sense. "My brother, Ethan. My car," she continued, savoring every word. "Your brother was just so down, you know? He needed a break. So we sold it. He's on a Mediterranean cruise right now. Just posted a picture from Santorini. He looks so happy." The air left my lungs. The blood pounded in my ears. Sold it. They sold it. And then, a strange sound bubbled up from my chest. It started as a low chuckle, then grew into a full, genuine laugh. My mother's triumphant expression curdled into confusion, then anger. "What's so funny?" she snapped, her voice sharp. "This is about family helping family. Your brother needed you." Her smile vanished completely when I finally met her gaze, the laughter dying in my throat, replaced by something cold and hard. "You really have no idea what you've done, do you?" I said softly. "Mom, there's something you don't know." My mind reeled back, not just weeks, but years, to where this whole mess truly began. The ghost of that car wasn't just a patch of oil on a concrete floor. It was the ghost of my grandfather. Everything I valued, everything I was, started with him in that very garage. Every Saturday, from the time I was 7 until he passed away when I was 16, was garage day. While other kids were playing video games, I was learning the difference between a socket wrench and a torque wrench. The garage was my grandfather's sanctuary. It smelled of motor oil, sawdust, and old coffee. It was a cathedral of forgotten things waiting to be brought back to life. He was a man built of quiet strength and calloused hands. He never said, "I love you," with words. He said it by patiently showing me how to gap a spark plug, or by letting me use his prized set of antique tools. He taught me that a man's worth wasn't in what he was given, but in what he could build and repair with his own 2 hands. It was an inheritance of character, not cash. And in the corner of that garage, under a dusty tarp, sat the Holy Grail. His 1969 Corvette Stingray, Rally Red. It was a project he never quite finished. To a little kid, it looked like a sleeping dragon, all curves and muscle. He'd lift the corner of the tarp, and the chrome would wink at me in the dim light. "One day, Leo," he'd say, his voice a low rumble, "we'll get her running. This isn't just a car. This is American history. It's freedom on four wheels." That car became my obsession. I read every book, every magazine about it. I could recite the engine specs in my sleep. It was more than just metal and paint to me. It was a promise. It was the physical manifestation of my grandfather's philosophy. That with enough hard work, patience, and know-how, you could take something broken and make it beautiful again. My parents never understood. My mother especially. "It's so unfeminine," she'd complain, even though I was a boy. What she meant was, it wasn't the interest she would have chosen for me. It wasn't clean. It wasn't prestigious. It didn't fit the picture she had in her head. When my grandfather passed away, it was like the music of my life stopped. The Saturdays became silent. The garage felt cavernous and empty. His lawyer told us he'd left the car to me in his will, but my father, acting as executor, sold it. "It's just a pile of parts, son," he'd said, patting my shoulder. "The money will be better for your college fund." I was 16. Couldn't fight it. But I watched that pile of parts get towed away, and I made a vow to myself. It wasn't about the car, not really. It was about the principle. One day I would earn it back. I would buy my own 1969 Corvette Stingray in Rally Red. I would finish what my grandfather started. It would be my tribute to him and my proof to myself and to my family that I was a man he would have been proud of. I would build my own legacy, not with what I was given, but with what I earned. At the time, I had no idea how much that simple vow would eventually cost me, or how much it would cost them. The favoritism in our house wasn't a secret. It was a fact of life, as obvious and constant as the wallpaper in the dining room. My younger brother, Ethan, was the golden boy. He was the sun, and I was the planet that quietly orbited him, my own light and heat ignored. Ethan was the athlete, the popular one. He had a charm that my quiet, focused nature couldn't compete with. Our parents poured all their resources into him. He got the expensive soccer camps, the designer clothes, the brand new Honda Civic for his 16th birthday, a party that cost more than my first year of community college textbooks. When he scraped by with C's, he was praised for trying his best. I was the responsible one, which was code for the one we don't have to worry about or invest in. My interest in mechanics was a dirty hobby. My straight A's were just expected. While Ethan's trophies lined the fireplace mantel, my academic awards were tucked away in a box in my closet. The most painful memory, the one that perfectly captures the dynamic, happened the summer I was 17. I'd been working a grueling job bagging groceries, saving every dollar. I had my eye on a professional-grade tool chest. It was on sale for $400. It was a serious investment, a foundation for the dream I was building. I was short by about $50. I swallowed my pride and asked my mom if she could loan it to me. I even offered to pay her back with interest. She didn't even look up from her magazine. "Leo, we don't have money for expensive toys," she said, her voice flat. "You need to be saving for your future, not wasting it on greasy junk." My face burned with humiliation. I mumbled an okay and retreated to my room. Not 10 minutes later, I heard Ethan bound into the kitchen. "Mom! Hey, Mom! Can I get 100? Me and the guys are going to that new steakhouse tonight, and then maybe a movie." I heard the rustle of her purse. "Of course, sweetie," she said, her voice warm and bright. "Is 100 enough? Here, take another 20 just in case. Have fun." I sat on my bed, staring at the wall, and I felt something inside me harden. It wasn't just unfairness. It was a message, sent loud and clear. Your passions are worthless. Your efforts are invisible. Your needs come second. Ethan's fleeting pleasure was more important than my long-term ambition. There would be no help for me, no safety net. Whatever I wanted in life, I would have to build it myself from the ground up with no help from them. So that's what I did. When I went off to college, I didn't just leave their house. I left that entire system of valuation behind. I worked 3 jobs: barista in the morning, library clerk in the afternoon, pizza delivery at night. I maintained a 4.0 GPA in finance. While Ethan was back home, living rent-free, having his laundry done, I was learning to survive on caffeine and sheer willpower. I was forging myself into a man who would never have to ask his parents for anything ever again. And with every dollar I saved, the image of that rally red Corvette got clearer and clearer in my mind. It was my North Star. Graduation was a quiet affair. My parents came, took a few photos, and told me they were proud, but their words felt hollow, like a script they were reading. The real celebration was internal. I had my degree, 0 student loans thanks to a patchwork of scholarships and my relentless work schedule, and a job offer from one of the most prestigious investment banks in Chicago. I had made it to the starting line. The 5 years that followed were a blur of 70-hour work weeks. I lived in a shoebox apartment in a less than glamorous part of the city. My furniture was secondhand, my diet consisted mostly of rice and chicken, and my idea of a vacation was a 3-day weekend where I got to sleep in. While my colleagues were buying condos and taking trips to Aspen, I was funneling every spare dollar into a high-yield savings account labeled Stingray. My friends thought I was crazy. My parents thought I was cheap. "You work so hard, Leo," my mother would say during our brief Sunday calls. "Why don't you buy yourself something nice? You could get a nice new Lexus." She didn't get it. I wasn't saving up for something nice. I was saving up for a piece of my soul. And then, one Tuesday afternoon, I saw it. An online listing from a classic car dealer in Wisconsin. A 1969 Corvette Stingray. L46 350 engine. For speed manual. And the color was rally red. My heart hammered against my ribs. The pictures were perfect. The mileage was low. The owner was a retired mechanic who had babied it for 30 years. The price was $85,000. I looked at my savings account. I had $86,247. I took the next day off work, drove 4 hours to Wisconsin, and walked into that dealership. The moment I saw it in person, I knew. It was more beautiful than the pictures. It smelled of old leather and gasoline, the scent of my grandfather's garage. I ran my hand along the fender, the paint smooth as glass. This was it. This was the culmination of everything. The missed parties, the early mornings, the years of quiet, relentless focus. The test drive was surreal. The engine roared to life with a sound that vibrated right through my bones. It was loud, raw, and unapologetic. It was the sound of freedom. I didn't even haggle. I wrote the check, signed the papers, and my hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the pen. The day I drove that car home to Chicago was one of the most emotional of my life. I felt my grandfather's presence in the passenger seat. A quiet, approving nod. This car wasn't a midlife crisis purchase. It was a statement. It was proof that I had kept my promise. It stood for my independence, my connection to the one man who truly understood me, and the simple, powerful truth that hard work pays off. I had built my dream piece by piece, dollar by dollar. And as I parked it in my secure garage in Chicago, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. It was mine. It was safe. Or so I thought. Life settled into a new, comfortable rhythm. My career at the bank was taking off. I was respected, I was good at my job, and I was finally starting to enjoy the fruits of my labor. On weekends, I'd take the Corvette out for long drives along Lake Michigan. The wind in my hair, the rumble of the V8 a constant, reassuring companion. I was also dating Clara. She was smart, funny, a graphic designer with a sharp wit and an eye for detail. She was also, miraculously, a car person. Her father owned a body shop, and she'd grown up around engines and Bondo. When I showed her the Corvette for the first time, her eyes lit up with genuine appreciation, not polite interest. She got it. She got me. One Monday morning, my boss, Veronica, called me into her office. Veronica was a force of nature, tough, brilliant, and fair. She didn't waste time with small talk. "Leo," she said, getting straight to the point, "Patterson Financial in Tokyo. They're looking to sign a massive new international fund with us. The deal is worth hundreds of millions. I need my best analyst to lead the presentation team. You'd be in Tokyo for 3 weeks. If you land this, the vice president promotion we talked about is yours. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. A straight shot to the executive level years ahead of schedule. There was no hesitation. I'll do it, I said. But as the excitement settled, a familiar anxiety began to creep in. 3 weeks. What was I going to do with the car? My apartment garage was secure, but there had been a string of high-end car thefts in the city recently. Professional crews who knew how to bypass modern security systems, let alone the simple locks of a classic car. Leaving it there for 3 weeks felt like leaving a pile of cash on a park bench. My first thought was to ask my parents. Their suburban home was safe, quiet. The garage was secure. It seemed like the logical choice. But that old, familiar hesitation was there. A knot of mistrust I couldn't quite shake. That night, I told Clara about the trip and my dilemma. We were at her apartment, and she was sketching in her notebook while I paced back and forth. I just have this bad feeling about leaving it at my parents', I admitted. My mom. She just sees it as a thing, an expensive toy. She doesn't understand the history. Clara stopped sketching and looked at me, a thoughtful expression on her face. Her father had a side business restoring classic cars, and she'd recently finished her own passion project, a replica Stingray. It was visually identical to mine. Same year, same rally red paint her dad had custom-matched, but it was built on a different frame with a more common engine. It was a beautiful car, a masterpiece of craftsmanship, but its market value was closer to $30,000, not $85,000. It was her daily driver. She tapped her pen against her chin. You know, she said slowly, a clever glint in her eye, my car is a lot less tempting than yours, and it's fully insured for theft. No questions asked. I stopped pacing and looked at her. A plan began to form in my mind, a crazy, elaborate what-if scenario. Felt paranoid, felt absurd, but it also felt necessary. What are you thinking? I asked. She smiled. I'm thinking that for the next 3 weeks, maybe you should be driving a replica, and maybe your real baby should be tucked away safely in my dad's climate-controlled workshop. It was a brilliant, devious plan born out of a deep-seated lack of trust. And I agreed to it in a heartbeat. Executing the swap felt like something out of a spy movie. The Wednesday before my flight, I met Clara at a deserted parking lot halfway between my apartment and her place. The 2 cars sat side by side under the buzzing orange glow of the parking lot lights, and for a moment, even I had trouble telling them apart. Clara had done an incredible job. The paint was a perfect match. The chrome gleamed in the same way. The only real differences were subtle things you'd only notice if you knew exactly what to look for. The slight difference in the texture of the leather on my original seats, the specific wear pattern on my steering wheel, and, most importantly, the vehicle identification number plates. The VIN on my dashboard was the real deal, matching the title that was locked safely in my fireproof box at home. The VIN on hers was for a completely different vehicle history. You're sure about this? Clara asked, dangling her keys. It feels a little crazy. Crazy is leaving an $85,000 piece of my life in a place I don't fully trust, I replied, my voice firm. This is insurance. We swapped keys. Driving her car felt strangely familiar yet fundamentally different. It looked the same, but the engine had a slightly different growl, the clutch engaged at a slightly different point. It was an echo of my car, not the real thing. The next day, I drove the replica to my parents' house. I pulled into the driveway and my father, Robert, came out to meet me. He was a good man, I thought, just weak. He was easily swayed by my mother's stronger personality. Wow, she's a beauty, he said, running a hand admiringly along the fender. I took a deep breath. Listen, Dad, I need a huge favor. I have to go to Tokyo for work for 3 weeks. I need to store the car here. Of course, son, no problem at all. She'll be safe as houses here. I looked him straight in the eye. I needed to make this crystal clear. There are some rules, though. It needs to be started once a week, Just let it idle for 10 minutes. The battery can be tricky. And please, I said, emphasizing every word, do not drive it, and do not, under any circumstances, let anyone else touch it. Okay? He put a hand on my shoulder, his expression sincere. Leo, you have my word. I will treat it like it's made of gold. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But as I handed him the keys to Clara's car, I felt a pang of guilt mixed with a strange sense of relief. I was deceiving him, yes, but I was also protecting myself. As I drove away in my rental, leaving the replica sitting in his garage, I justified it to myself. If everything went fine, he'd never know the difference. No harm, no foul. And if something did happen, well, then my paranoia would be vindicated. At that moment, I still hoped I was just being crazy. I still hoped my dad's word meant something. Tokyo was a whirlwind. The city was electric, a vibrant chaos of neon lights and ancient temples. The work was intense, but it was rewarding. Our presentation was a massive success. The Patterson financial executives were blown away. My team was flawless. On the final day, Veronica called me from Chicago. They're drawing up the contracts, Leo, she said, her voice ecstatic. The VP promotion is yours when you get back. Congratulations. You earned it. I should have been on top of the world. And professionally, I was. But personally, a knot of dread was tightening in my stomach with each passing day. My weekly check-in calls home had become strange. The first week, my dad was enthusiastic. Yep, started her right up, son. Purrs like a kitten. The second week, his voice was more subdued. Everything's fine, Leo. Don't you worry. When I asked if he'd started it, he hesitated for a fraction of a second too long before saying, yeah, of course. By the third week, my mom was the one answering his phone. Oh, your father's busy, she'd say breezily. Everything here is just fine. The car is fine. Stop worrying and focus on your job. Her cheerfulness felt forced, her assurances hollow. Meanwhile, a different story was playing out on social media. My brother, Ethan, who worked a dead-end admin job and was constantly complaining about being broke, suddenly started posting pictures from Greece. Not just a budget trip either. He was on a yacht. He was at a 5-star resort in Santorini, sipping a cocktail with the caption, "Living the dream, #blessed." I stared at the photo on my phone, the glowing blue of the Aegean Sea a stark contrast to the cold dread filling my veins. Where did he get that kind of money? He didn't have a rich friend who would bankroll a trip like that. He couldn't even afford his own rent without my parents helping him out. The timing was too perfect. The evasiveness of my parents, Ethan's sudden windfall. It was a dark equation, and I was terrified of the answer. I called my best friend, David, back in the States. Am I crazy? I asked, pacing my hotel room. Or is it possible my parents sold my car to send my brother to Europe? David was silent for a moment. Knowing your family, he said finally. It's not crazy, man. It's plausible. Horrifyingly plausible. The final phone call was the day before my flight home. I tried my dad's cell again. It went straight to voicemail. I called the house line. My mom answered, her voice strained. Leo, hi. So excited for you to come home. Mom, where's Dad? And I want a straight answer. How is the car? For heaven's sake, Leo, you and that car, she snapped, the facade of cheerfulness cracking. Everything is fine. We'll see you tomorrow. And she hung up. The line went dead, but the message was deafeningly clear. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. A cold certainty washed over me. They did it. They really did it. My own parents. I leaned my head against the cold glass of the hotel window, looking out at the sprawling lights of Tokyo, and I felt utterly, completely alone. The success of the trip, the promotion, it all turned to ash in my mouth. My return home wasn't going to be a celebration. It was going to be a war. The 14-hour flight from Tokyo to Chicago was the longest of my life. Couldn't sleep. I couldn't watch a movie. I just sat there in the darkness of the cabin, the drone of the engines a monotonous hum in my ears, and let the rage build. It wasn't a hot, explosive anger. It was a cold, hard, dense fury that settled deep in my bones. I replayed every conversation, every red flag, every dismissive comment my mother had ever made about my hobby. I remembered my father's sincere-looking face as he promised to protect my property. "I'll treat it like it's made of gold," he'd said. The memory was so bitter it tasted like acid. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the photos. I stopped on one from the night of the swap. The two Corvettes, side by side. My original and Clara's replica. I zoomed in. There were the subtle tells. A tiny rock chip on the front fender of my car that wasn't on hers. The slightly deeper gloss of the chrome on my bumper. Details no one would ever notice unless they were looking for them. Details that were about to become exhibits A and B in the case I was building in my mind. I opened my messaging app and sent a text to Clara. It was the middle of the night for her, but I knew she'd see it when she woke up. "It happened," I wrote. "I'm 99% sure they sold your car. The trip was a cover. Ethan is in Greece. Time for Plan B." Then I pulled up my email and typed a new message. Subject: urgent consultation. I sent it to the corporate lawyer our firm sometimes used for personal matters. She was known for being a shark. Her name was Alicia Ramirez. I briefly explained the situation. A suspected unauthorized sale of a high-value asset under false pretenses. I asked for a meeting the day after I landed. I was no longer just a son who had been betrayed. I was a plaintiff preparing his case. The hurt was still there, a raw, gaping wound in my chest. But the cold, calculating analyst part of my brain, the part that had just landed a multi-million-dollar deal in Tokyo, was now in control. Emotions could wait. Strategy came first. As the plane began its descent over the glittering grid of Chicago, I didn't feel like I was coming home. I felt like a general returning to a battlefield he didn't choose, but one he was fully prepared to win. The boy who had left for Tokyo was gone. The man who was landing was someone my parents had never met before, and they were about to find out exactly what they had created. Stepping out of O'Hare Airport into the crisp autumn air of Chicago did nothing to clear my head. The rage and resolve I'd cultivated on the flight had solidified into a cold, heavy lump in my chest. I bypassed the cabs and went to the rental car counter, picking a nondescript sedan. I needed the anonymity. I needed the control. The drive from the airport to my parents' house in Glenview is usually about 40 minutes. It's a route I've driven thousands of times, a journey through familiar landmarks and memories. But today, every street sign, every familiar storefront felt alien, part of a life that no longer belonged to me. I passed the park where my grandfather taught me to ride a bike. I passed the high school where I'd met my first girlfriend. These were pieces of a past where I still believed in the fundamental goodness of my family, in the sanctity of a promise. That world felt like a foreign country now. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Veronica. "Welcome back, VP. Let's touch base Monday to discuss your new salary and team structure." Well done. I glanced at the message. Vice President. A new salary. The pinnacle of what I'd been working towards. Any other day, this message would have sent a jolt of exhilaration through me. Today it was just data. It was external validation from a world that operated on logic and merit. It was a jarring contrast to the emotional chaos I was driving towards, a world governed by entitlement and betrayal. The promotion didn't make the pain go away, but it did sharpen my resolve. It was a reminder of my own power, a power I had earned, and a power my family had grossly underestimated. I turned onto their street. The houses were neat, the lawns were manicured. It was the picture of suburban peace. But I knew that behind the door of my childhood home, a lie was festering. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw my father through the living room window. He was just standing there, looking out, and he had the face of a man waiting for a verdict. He saw my car pull in, and I watched him physically flinch before disappearing from view. He knew. He knew I knew. I killed the engine and sat for a full minute in the sudden silence, my hands gripping the steering wheel. I took one deep, steadying breath. The time for suspicion and anxiety was over. This was the moment of truth. I got out of the car, slammed the door with a final, definitive thud, and walked towards the garage, my footsteps echoing on the concrete. The confrontation was about to begin. I didn't give them a chance to set the stage. I walked straight past the front door, my rental car keys clutched in my fist, and headed for the side entrance to the garage. I punched in the code and the door swung open into the silence and the emptiness. I just stood there, letting the reality of the vacant space sink in. A moment later, the kitchen door opened. My dad, Robert, stood there, his face pale and drawn. He couldn't meet my eyes. He just stared at a spot on the floor somewhere to my left. Behind him, my mother, Diane, pushed past, her expression a practiced mask of concern. "Leo, you're home. We were so worried, we didn't hear you pull up." Her voice was high and brittle. I didn't respond to her. I kept my gaze locked on the empty spot. "Where is it?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. My father flinched. My mother, however, launched into her performance. She walked towards me, her hands clasped together as if in prayer. "Leo, honey, we need to talk. Your brother, he was in a really bad place. A kind of depression, I think. He just seemed so lost. He needed this trip. He needed to find himself." I turned my head slowly to look at her. He needed to find himself on a Mediterranean cruise? And my car paid for it. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. Her facade of concern dissolved, replaced by a defensive fire in her eyes. "It's just a car, Leo. Family is what matters. You're so successful now, you have a big salary. You can buy 10 more cars if you want. Ethan has nothing. He needed a lifeline. We did what any loving parents would do." "What any loving parents would do," I repeated, the words tasting like poison. "Is that what you call selling your son's property behind his back while he's on the other side of the planet?" "We didn't have a choice," she insisted, her voice rising. "He had this non-refundable opportunity, and we needed the money quickly before you came home and tried to talk us out of it." She admitted it. She actually admitted that the deception was deliberate, that they rushed to do it behind my back. My father finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "We got a good price for it, son. $50,000. The man was happy to pay in cash. $50,000. They had sold my $85,000 car, a collector's item whose value was only appreciating, for $50,000 in cash. Like it was some stolen item they needed to unload quickly in a back alley. They hadn't just betrayed me. They had been fools. They had been so blinded by their favoritism and so contemptuous of my property that they'd practically given it away. That was the final straw. The sheer, breathtaking incompetence of it all, layered on top of the malicious betrayal. "You have no idea," I whispered, shaking my head. "You really have no idea." And that's when the laugh escaped. It wasn't a laugh of joy. It was a laugh of disbelief, of irony so thick and bitter it was almost choking me. It was the laugh of a man who had planned for the worst, and had his worst expectations exceeded in every possible way. My mother stared at me, her face a mask of indignation. "What could possibly be funny right now? We made a sacrifice for your brother." "A sacrifice?" I chuckled, the sound echoing in the empty garage. "You didn't make a sacrifice. You made a mistake. A very, very big mistake." I met her furious gaze with a dead calm stare of my own. "You see, the car you sold, it wasn't mine." The air in the garage went still. My father's head snapped up, his eyes wide with confusion. My mother's mouth opened, then closed, a flicker of disbelief warring with her anger. "What are you talking about? It wasn't yours," she demanded. "Don't be ridiculous. We saw you drive it here." "Oh, you saw me drive a car here," I corrected her, my voice as cold and precise as a surgeon's scalpel. "You saw a 1969 Corvette Stingray, painted rally red. And you assumed because you have never, not once, respected me or my possessions enough to pay attention to the details." I pulled out my phone and swiped to the photo I had bookmarked. The picture of the two cars, side by side in the parking lot. I held it up for them to see. "This," I said, pointing to the car on the left, "is my car." My numbers matching, L46, original Corvette. The one I spent 5 years saving for. The one my grandfather left me, that you sold out from under me as a kid. The one that's currently valued at over $85,000. It is parked, safe and sound, in a climate-controlled facility in downtown Chicago. I then pointed to the car on the right. And this, I said, my voice dropping, is the car you sold. It belongs to my girlfriend, Clara. It's a replica, a beautiful, expertly crafted replica, but a replica nonetheless. It's built on a different chassis with a standard engine. Its market value is about 30 grand, maybe 35 on a good day. I watched their faces as the information processed. My father looked like he was going to be sick. The color drained from my mother's face, leaving her skin a pasty, sickly white. The smugness, the self-righteous anger, it all evaporated, replaced by a dawning, pure terror. You sold Clara's car for $50,000, I continued, pressing my advantage. Which means, first, you scammed the buyer, a man named Peter Donovan, I presume. You sold him a replica while letting him believe it was an authentic classic. That's called fraud. My mother swayed slightly, gripping the door frame for support. Second, I went on, my voice relentless. You forged the signature on the title. Or did you just hand him a fake one? Either way, that's a felony. It's called forgery. Leo, please. My father whispered, his voice cracking. I'm not finished, I snapped, my eyes boring into his. Third, and most importantly, you entered this garage, took possession of a vehicle that did not belong to you, and sold it without the owner's permission. That has a very simple name. It's called Grand Theft Auto. Another felony. I put my phone back in my pocket. The silence was deafening, broken only by my mother's ragged breathing. So no, I said, the cold fury I'd been holding back for weeks finally rising to the surface. I'm not laughing because I think this is a joke. I'm laughing at the sheer, spectacular, life-ruining stupidity of what you've done. You didn't just betray your son. You committed a series of serious crimes, all to fund a vacation for your precious golden boy. You're not just bad parents. You're criminals. And you have absolutely no idea the world of trouble that is about to come down on your heads. This is the moment that changed everything, when I finally took back control of my life. Thank you for staying with me this far. You are amazing. Please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 down below, just so I know you've been on this journey with me. It doesn't just help more people find this story. It lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone out there. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to continue sharing the rest of this journey. The day after I dropped that bomb in the garage, Clara and I sat in the sterile, intimidatingly expensive conference room of Alicia Ramirez's law firm. Alicia was exactly as advertised. Sharp, direct, and exuding an aura of someone who did not suffer fools gladly. She had a folder open in front of her, filled with the documents I'd emailed her. A copy of my car's real title, a copy of Clara's title, and a detailed timeline of events. Let's be perfectly clear about the situation, Alicia said, her pen tapping a rhythm on the polished mahogany table. Your parents, Robert and Diane, have exposed themselves to significant legal jeopardy. Based on your account, I see 3 primary charges a district attorney would be very interested in. She held up a finger. 1. Grand Theft Auto. They took possession of Ms. Albright's vehicle with the intent to permanently deprive her of it. In this state, given the vehicle's value, that's a Class 2 felony. We're talking 3 to 7 years in prison. Clara, sitting beside me, drew a sharp breath. Hearing the actual words, the actual prison time, made it terrifyingly real. Alicia held up a second finger. 2. Forgery. To sell a vehicle, you need to sign over the title. Since the car was registered to Clara, they would have had to forge her signature. That's a Class 3 felony. 2 to 5 years. My own stomach tightened. This was escalating far beyond a family drama. And 3, Alicia continued, her eyes locking onto mine. Fraud. They misrepresented the product they were selling to the buyer, Mr. Donovan. They sold a replica as an authentic classic for $50,000. that could be prosecuted as theft by deception or wire fraud if they used the internet to list it. Another felony, another potential prison sentence. She leaned back in her chair, letting the weight of her words fill the room. Individually, these are serious. Combined, a prosecutor could paint a picture of a calculated, malicious criminal enterprise. They wouldn't see a family dispute. They'd see a conspiracy to commit theft and fraud. The words hung in the air. Conspiracy, felony, prison. Just then, as if on cue, my phone rang. The caller ID read, Peter Donovan. The buyer. I put it on speaker. Hello, I answered. Hi, is this Leo? A man's voice asked, sounding agitated. I bought a Corvette from your parents, and the DMV is kicking back the title transfer. They're saying the VIN on the paperwork doesn't match the one on the car's chassis. There's a serious problem here, and if it's not fixed in 24 hours, I'm calling the police. I looked at Alicia. She gave me a slight, decisive nod. The clock was ticking. The fuse had been lit. I gave Peter Donovan the number for my lawyer and told him she would be in touch to resolve the issue completely. He was wary, but agreed to hold off on calling the police for 48 hours. The moment I hung up, I called my father. I put it on speaker again. What do you want, Leo? He answered, his voice hollow and defeated. I'm with my lawyer, I said flatly. You have two options. Option A is we go to the police, report the theft and fraud, and let the justice system handle it. You and Mom will likely face multiple felony charges and potential jail time. I heard a gasp on the other end of the line, which I knew was my mother. Option B, I continued, is you make this right. Immediately, you will return the full $50,000 to Mr. Donovan so he can return Clara's car. You will also pay for all our legal fees, and you will get Ethan on the first flight home from Greece. He is going to contribute. You have 24 hours to tell me how you're going to get the money, or I'm moving forward with option A. The choice is yours. I hung up before he could respond. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. Within the hour, my phone was blowing up. My Aunt Sylvia, my mother's sister, called first. Leopold, I cannot believe what your mother just told me. She shrieked into the phone. How could you threaten to send your own parents to jail? They did it for your brother. Family helps family. You should be ashamed. Did Mom also tell you they committed 3 felonies, Aunt Sylvia? I asked coldly. Family doesn't mean you get a free pass to break the law. I hung up on her sputtering protests. Next, my Uncle George, my dad's younger brother, called. His tone was completely different. Leo, it's George, he said, his voice grave. Your dad called me. I just want you to know. You're doing the right thing. I've watched this dynamic with your brother play out for 20 years. It was bound to blow up someday. Don't let them guilt you. Hold your ground. His support was a small island of sanity in a sea of chaos. The final call I made was to Ethan. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice lazy and background noise sounding like a beach party. Hey, bro, what's up? The party's over, I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. You're on the next flight back to Chicago. Mom and Dad committed several crimes to fund your vacation, and you're going to help pay for the consequences. He actually laughed. Whoa, chill out. I didn't create any mess. I didn't ask them to sell a car. But you spent the money, didn't you? I countered. You saw $50,000 appear out of nowhere and didn't ask a single question. That makes you complicit. If you are not on a plane in the next 12 hours, I will make sure the police report includes your name as a beneficiary of stolen funds. Your choice. For the first time in his life, Ethan was silent. The golden boy had finally come face to face with a problem that Mommy and Daddy couldn't fix for him. The walls of his fantasy world were crumbling down. 1 month later, the landscape of my family had been irrevocably altered. There was no magic wand, no tearful movie of the week reconciliation. There was only the cold, hard process of paying a debt. My threat was not a bluff, and my parents, faced with the very real prospect of trading their suburban home for a prison cell, scrambled to comply. The first step was the most humiliating for them. They had to take out a home equity loan. I sat with my father at the bank, a silent observer, as he signed the paperwork for a $40,000 loan that would, in his words, ensure we're paying this off until the day we die. There was no self-pity in his voice, only a profound, weary resignation. Ethan was forced to contribute the next part. He had returned from Greece, his tan already fading, looking sullen and lost. I made him sit down with me and go through his finances. He had to drain the entirety of his savings account, which amounted to a little over $10,000. It wasn't much, but it was everything he had. For the first time, he was being held accountable. The final $5,000 was the most symbolic. My mother had a collection of jewelry, pieces she'd inherited or that my father had bought her over the years. It was her pride and joy, a symbol of her status. To cover the remaining balance, she had to sell it. All of it. I didn't go with her, but my father later told me she sat in the car outside the jeweler's for 20 minutes, weeping, before she could bring herself to go in. She came out with a check and no rings, no necklace, no earrings. She came out unadorned. The money, a cashier's check for $55,000, $50 for the restitution and $5 for Alicia's legal fees, was delivered to Peter Donovan. Clara got her car back, along with a formal, notarized letter of apology from my parents and Ethan, which Alicia had drafted. The wording was brutally honest, admitting to the deception and the illegal nature of their actions. But the financial cost was only part of it. The emotional cost was etched on their faces. My father, a man who cherished his weekends, started working a second job doing construction on Saturdays to help chip away at the new loan. I drive by the new housing development on the edge of town and see him there, his back bent, looking older than I'd ever seen him. My mother seemed smaller. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a quiet shame. She stopped hosting her neighborhood book club. She stopped talking about her and my father's retirement plans. The foundation of her world, built on appearances and the success of her golden boy, had been demolished. Ethan got a second job, too, waiting tables on weeknights. He was tired all the time, circles under his eyes. He moved into a cheaper apartment with 2 roommates. His blessed life had vanished. This wasn't about revenge for me. I took no joy in their suffering. This was about consequences. It was about balance. For my entire life, the scales in our family had been tipped impossibly in one direction. Now, for the first time, they were level. The financial restitution was a legal requirement, but the real healing, if it was ever going to happen, had to come from somewhere else. At my insistence, backed by Alicia's legal leverage, my parents and Ethan began attending family therapy sessions. The first few were, by all accounts, a disaster. My mother cried, my father stared at the floor, and Ethan simmered with resentment. But slowly, painfully, something began to shift. The therapist, a no-nonsense woman named Dr. Evans, began to dismantle the toxic architecture of our family, brick by brick. She gave them words for their behavior: enmeshment, emotional neglect, parentification. For the first time, my mother was forced to confront the fact that her smothering of Ethan was not love, but a way to fill a void in her own life. My father had to face his passivity, his failure to be a protector for both his sons. I kept my distance, needing space to process my own anger and grief. I poured my energy into my new role at work. I took my real Corvette out of storage and spent a weekend detailing it until every inch of chrome shone like a mirror. It felt like I was polishing a piece of my own soul, restoring its value. Then one Saturday afternoon, about 2 months after the whole ordeal began, my father showed up at my apartment unannounced. He looked nervous, twisting his old baseball cap in his hands. "Can I come in?" he asked. I hesitated, then stepped aside. We stood awkwardly in my living room for a moment before he finally spoke. I went out to the old farm property where your grandfather's stuff is stored," he said, not meeting my eye. "You know, his old Ford truck is still sitting in that barn. The one he was going to restore after the Corvette. I knew the one. A rusty but solid 1955 F-100. My grandfather's daily driver for 30 years. My father finally looked at me, and his eyes were full of a pain and regret that felt raw and real. "I know I can't fix what I did, Leo. I broke my promise to you, and I broke the promise I made to Dad to look after you. But I was thinking, maybe we could fix it up? Together. Just, if you want. It was a clumsy offering. It was a flawed, imperfect olive branch. He wasn't trying to buy my forgiveness. He was trying to connect with me through the only language we both truly understood. The language of the garage. The legacy of my grandfather. It wasn't a magical fix. The anger didn't just vanish. But as I looked at my tired, broken father, I saw a man who was finally trying to build something instead of just letting things fall apart. Okay, Dad, I said, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. Yeah, okay, let's do that. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But for the first time in a long, long time, it felt like hope. The months that followed were a slow, deliberate process of rebuilding. Not just a vintage truck, but the fractured remnants of a family. Working on that old Ford with my dad was strange at first. The silence was heavy, filled with unspoken words. But slowly, the familiar rhythm of work took over. The scrape of a wire brush on rust, the satisfying click of a socket wrench, the shared frustration over a bolt that wouldn't budge. We didn't talk about what happened. Not directly. Instead, we talked about carburetors and wiring harnesses. We talked about Grandpa. My dad shared stories I'd never heard before, about him and his father working on that very truck when he was a boy. In sharing the history of the truck, he was, in his own way, acknowledging the history he had broken and trying to honor it. The changes in my mom and Ethan were less direct, but they were there. My mom started calling me, not to ask for anything or to talk about Ethan, but just to ask how my week was. The calls were awkward, stilted, but she was trying. She was learning to see me as a person, not just a resource. Ethan's transformation was the most surprising. Having to work 2 jobs to pay his own way forced him into a maturity he'd always been shielded from. One evening, he sent me a text. It was a screenshot of a rare fender trim piece from an online forum. The message read, "Think this would fit Grandpa's truck?" It was a small gesture, but it was monumental. It was the first time in his life he had ever shown any interest in my world, in our shared heritage. It was an acknowledgement that we were brothers, connected by more than just our parents. Today, I stand in my own garage, looking at my Corvette. It's more than just a car to me now. It's a symbol of my resilience, a reminder of the importance of setting boundaries. Standing up for myself didn't mean abandoning the people I love. It meant teaching them how to love me correctly. It meant forcing them to see me, to respect me, and in doing so, forcing them to become better versions of themselves. The family isn't perfect. The scars are still there. But we are building something new, something more honest. It's a slow restoration project, much like the old Ford truck now sitting in my parents' garage, one piece at a time with patience and a whole lot of work. The ultimate lesson wasn't about the car, but about the value of self-respect. And that's an inheritance worth fighting for. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever had to draw a hard line with your own family to protect yourself? Share your story in the comments below. And please, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what I have to share next. Your support truly means the world.